Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here and welcome back to the Recording in a Home Music Studio course. In this video, we're going to talk about recording virtual bass. So virtual bass guitars, what are they? Basically, they are no different to anything else we're going to talk about that is virtual in this course. It is a virtual instrument, but we're specifically just targeting bass in this section here because we're going to obviously record some in our own song. Whether you need that in your song is entirely up to you. So it is, as I said, really not much different to virtual drums. It's not much different to what we've got coming up with other virtual instruments. We basically take a program that is a virtual instrument, which we've already talked about in another video. We load it onto a MIDI or instrument track, depending on what it's called in your software. And then we use some sort of MIDI controller, whether that's a keyboard or a pad or something else, to play that part in and have it record MIDI notes and then generate the sounds with the software. Now you can also draw the MIDI notes in by hand within your software if you are skilled enough to do that and you would like to do it that way. You have that flexibility as well. Now, what bass guitar virtual instrument you get is totally up to you. There is tons of them, right? We can be having virtual instruments that emulate the sound of real bass guitars. They can emulate the sound of a double bass. They can emulate synth style basses, right? Moog type bass effects, dirty, nasty, gnarly bass sounds, right? We're not locked to just a standard bass guitar. You can if you want, but you can also use a little bit of orchestral type. So you might use a cello to act as your bass element, right? So we can stretch out here a bit and get some different sounds, especially in my case here, where I have already recorded a real bass. I'm most likely not going to be emulating another bass again. I'm going to be trying something entirely different to add to that to complement what I've already done. Now, if you don't have a real bass and you did not do that in the previous video, then you might be looking at doing a real bass guitar in a virtual instrument style effect here. Now, as with anything that emulates sort of real instruments, stringed instruments, especially like basses and guitars, some of these virtual instruments can be hit or miss, so definitely try a few out, get the one that sounds the best. But a lot of the time they are very accurate and they can sound great. The problem can be you writing the MIDI in a way that makes it sound great. And that's where it can start to get a little bit complicated, especially if you are inputting them in by hand, or even if you are putting them in with a synth sort of keyboard, you know, having not the ability to potentially do vibrato and all that sort of stuff can impact the sound that you get out of it. All right, so in a minute, what we're going to do is we're going to go over and we're going to set up our tracks, we're going to set up our inputs, and I'm going to be importing some sort of virtual bass, which I will play around with to find the sound that I'm after and what it's going to do in the song. And we're going to record that in, and I'll show you how the MIDI notes come up and where the instrument sits and all that sort of stuff and how it works and how I am going to actually play it in with my MIDI controller. All right, so we're in Cubase here, and the first thing we need to do when we want to set up our virtual bass recording is to add a track for our virtual bass. So as you can see here, we've got our drums, we've got our guitar part, and we've got some real bass instruments here. An amp and a DI. So now we're going to add another track. And this time we're going to give it's going to be an instrument track, okay? And we can pick any one of our sort of synth items here. We could pick a particular bass one if we want. I'm not going to actually do that. What I'm going to go for is the Equator X64. and I'm going to output it to the bass bus, and we're going to have one track, and I'm going to add that. Okay, and our synth element here, the Equator 64, is going to open up. If it doesn't open up in your software, that's fine. We can do that later. So I'll close it for now. I'm actually going to move this into this folder, and in Cubase we can just, you can tell it's outside of the folder because of the fact that it's sitting back here. It's not indented like this. And you can also see that when we close the folder, it doesn't get collapsed under the folder. So the quickest and easiest way to move this into the folder is to grab it and drag it to the point where it is showing a green arrow on the folder, and then you'll see it just quickly indents itself there. So now if I collapse it, it'll disappear in this base folder. Now I'm going to give this our usual baby blue color for bass, and we'll give this a name. We'll just call it V bass for virtual. All right, and what we can do is we can play around with sounds, experiment, etc. But if you ever do want to change it, we can just go over here and just click on the name here, and we can go and pick a totally different virtual instrument. So if we want to switch instruments because we're not finding the sound we want, that's fine. We can do that. I'm going to stick with what we've got, and it's going to automatically open it again, which I don't want. Now I'm going to be using my Rolly Seaboard to play this part in. Now the Rolly Seaboard has a different sort of setup than some other keyboards because it has more functions than a normal keyboard. So in my case here, I just need to change a few things. The MIDI channel defaults to channel 1. I need to change it to any because it uses multiple channels for the Seaboard. And the Seaboard also uses some fancy expression. So I'm going to turn on note expression here and add 3 elements, and then also tick that box. So don't worry yourself about that. That's something, unless you have a Rolly Seaboard, and you can look that up yourself to see what's going on there. But that's a pretty unique thing to that. So if you don't have one, that is fine. You don't need to worry about it. I always have this button enabled, ASIO latency compensation, because I've found in the past when I record MIDI instruments that they don't always, when you record them, they are slightly out of sync with all your audio tracks. And it's because it doesn't take into account the latency that has occurred with getting the instrument in and all that sort of stuff, and the latency of the buffer size, etc. So I just find with that ticked, it records the instrument more in time. And to be honest with you, I don't even know why you would have it unticked. Maybe there's a reason, and please, if anybody knows, feel free to explain it. But I always have it ticked because I just find it works. Now with a virtual instrument, even though there is a monitor button, I find you don't need to use it. To be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure why it's there, because the virtual instrument makes a sound whether it's there on or not. We do have to have the record enable turned on, and the record process is identical to anything else. Now, if you don't have an external piece of equipment, you can draw this in. So we could come in here and draw a section that will then create sort of a part, and then we could double click on it, and you'll see here it opens up our window here. Now, very similar to when we did the virtual drums, I could then pencil in some notes. The difference here is that they're not like hits on a drum. Now they're actually notes. Right, so okay, so Equator is expecting a little bit different notes here, so it's not playing. But if I switch to something else, so I'll go over to this instrument here, we can then hear that it plays these notes that I drew. Right, so if we open it up, we'll just close that down. We could play any notes we want. Well, obviously I don't know what I'm drawing here, but you can see what I'm doing, and we can edit the velocity here down the bottom. So we could have different velocities, make it harder, softer, whatever. We can also shorten notes, make them longer, whatever you want to do. Okay, that's obviously off the scale there. Right, you get the point. Obviously, that is entirely not musical. And we can delete all those and edit them and do whatever you want with them, right? So that is one way to create your bass part. But what I'm going to do is actually play it in with my Roland C board. So we're going to set that up. All right, so we've got some sound going. That's good. And that was me hitting the MIDI controller. So what we need to do is now sort of experiment with our sounds. So we obviously want to work out our part, what sort of sounds we want here. And in my software here, we can filter on bass and just sort of flick through a few of the options here. So let's sort of flick through. But what I might do is get the section playing. Okay, so the background here for what I'm thinking, okay, because, and I'm not sure if this is going to stay in the song, but we're going to try it. Okay, so the background here is that I've had a listen through the song and I'm pretty happy with not having virtual bass in any of the verse and choruses. But what I thought we could do is maybe add one to the bridge and maybe the outro, because it sort of lends itself maybe a little bit more to how we did the electronic drum kit in those sections as opposed to the acoustic in the other ones. Because, you know, if you listen to the other parts, I just don't feel that this needs a virtual bass at the moment. And I'm also keeping in mind all the other parts that we've got coming up as well, like orchestrals and keyboards and all that sort of stuff. So I'm trying to find spots to fit all of this in that may actually work, all right? But I see that there could be an element here. And I have an idea in my head. What my idea is, and I don't know if it's going to work, but it's to sort of play with the notes that the real bass is doing, but do it in a way that's not so stabby. Do it in a way that's more like a pad. So it more just carries on and sits in the background, adding more thickness to the part. All right, so what we can do here is if I double click on this bridge cycle marker here, it'll automatically create a loop. And then I'll just activate the loop function. And now we've got it looping. So when we press play, it'll just loop this bridge part over and over again. And what we can do is we can play with our part here and we can find a sound that suits what we want. So if we open up here, we sort by bass. You can obviously sort by whatever you want, but in this case here, we're doing bass. And I'm just going to play with some parts and get something that I think might go with the song. So we'll start a loop now and I will flick through it. All right, so now I'm going to get my loop playing and we'll flick through some sounds and we'll see if we can find one that sounds good and then we'll be ready to record. Okay, so I'm liking the sound of this Enormo drone, so I'm just going to double click on that. It's got some, we can obviously tweak this to our heart's content if we so choose, but I'm the sort of guy that generally likes patches and only tweak if I feel I really want to. You know, sometimes it's a good time and place to experiment. But for me right now, I'm going to just go with a patch. So what we're going to do is obviously, as I said, we're going to set our record enable. We're going to start recording and then we're going to record our part in, and hopefully we'll get it right. We may have to edit and do some tweaking of notes, but the great thing with MIDI is it's very easily editable. So we'll see how we go and we'll give it a shot and record it now. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that, and it's a matter of now balancing it and things like that. But as I said, we could also come in here if we wanted to and start to edit it a bit. So if we find where it starts, expand it out here. Here we go. So here's the notes here. So if we wanted to get them more right on the beat, we could obviously do that. So let's say we play our part. So, you know, you could move it around if you wanted to earlier. Which I don't. But we could put them all on the beat there. So you can make them really on time or not. You know, it's entirely up to you how you prefer to play your part. Now with these, I do have a lot more control because, there is some extra functionality here. You can see all the extra componentry that comes in with the keyboard here that you could edit if you so choose. I'm not going to do that right now. So it might be a matter of, okay, let's get the level a bit more right because maybe it's a bit too loud. All right, so now the great thing is, obviously with software like this, is we can edit things. So for a start, let's just trim up this little file here because we don't need it to be that long. Right, our MIDI notes are really only in this section, so there's no point going that long. So you could just trim it up so it's nice. But the other great thing, well, actually, let's put it back on the bar there for the moment, because what I want to do is we can also copy it. So if I hold the Alt key, I can grab this part. It looks like it's going to cut it, but if you just grab it, I can bring it over here. And now let's go over to this section here, our outro. Let's just zoom in because we need to get it in the right spot. And it will be a matter of working out, okay, where do we want the note to hit? Okay, that part there's not working. What I might do is actually trim this and take the last half of this. So if we line that up there. Okay, so we have a problem with this note here on the end. It doesn't really work because it's changing to a different part. So, we could just cut that out if we wanted to, or now it all depends on whether you wanted it to repeat. So for instance, if you wanted that note to play to continue on, we could do something there. And you could even leave that in if you so felt that that worked, you know, or we could come in here and edit it. So hang on, let me just do something here. So if we delete that note at least. I want that on the bar. Let's do that again. Let me just go back because I also think these aren't, I don't think these are really in the right spot either. I don't think I've got it lined up 100%. So what I'll do is I'll start by selecting this one. Except I haven't got the playhead in the right spot. My bad. That's the notes we didn't want in there. That's fine. Get rid of those. So note got jammed on there. I had to hit a note, the right note, to get it to turn off. That's a bit of a unfortunate sort of mishap. Okay, so that's in the other part, but let me just delete this note first. So we only really have one note. Now the interesting thing is, because of the way this board works, it's actually me sliding between two notes, but it only shows it as one note. But I think if you open this up, you'll find the variances there of going between notes and here. Okay, so we want to switch over to now editing this one. Okay, again, I think we want to delete that one and that one. We just end up with one note again. So we could shorten the note if we wanted to. So we'll leave it that way for the moment, but what I might actually do is re-record that part and actually get it to a single note instead of the waviness, because I'm just not convinced that's working for us. But we'll trim that there, but you can see how easily it is that you can copy and paste as well and move stuff around to get it to do what you want it to do. And in theory, we can open this instrument up and we can change it to any sound we want, and it'll have no impact on this notation here, right? This is purely just notes, okay? It is not actually the sound. The sound is created by the virtual instrument, so we can change that at our leisure to whatever we like. So we're going to lock that in, and, well, as I said, I might do a little bit of tweaking off camera, but other than that, the part's in, and I'm pretty happy with that. So we'll leave that in for our virtual bass, and yeah, we'll continue on. Okay, so I've edited the bass a little bit more, and I actually re-recorded the outro here instead of just copying it, just so it was 100% right, because the end note, I wasn't liking how it copied there, so I wanted to create it again. So I've done that. So normally in these videos so far, I've been playing through the entire song just to get an idea of where we're at. I'm not going to play through the entire song this time because all we've done is add this part to the bridge and the outro. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play it through just from this last part here, just from the last bit of chorus 2 just to the end so you can get a feel for how the bridge then goes into the verse and chorus and then into the outro with our new virtual bass part. Okay, so now that you've seen me do it, hopefully that is going to give you some insight into what you need to do in your song if you are recording some virtual bass. And if you are, please go to the PDF, grab the worksheet and write down what parts you need to create through your song, and then obviously document the status as you go. Mark them complete as you've done them so that you sort of know where you're at during your process of this creation of your song. If you do have any questions about this process or anything about virtual bass instruments and anything else, please feel free to put the questions in the comments. Hopefully this video has been helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.